Live from Arlington, Virginia, this is Transport Topics Newsmakers, the digital interview series that gives you access to candid conversations between industry experts and a veteran reporter. Here's your host, Dan Ronan.
Hello and welcome to Newsmakers from Transport Topics. I'm Dan Ronan. Our guest is someone who is well known in the trucking industry. We welcome for the first time to Newsmakers the American Trucking Association's president and CEO, Chris Spear, to our conversation. As I said, this is the first time that Chris has joined us on Newsmaker, and we'll be discussing some important topics taking place in the industry. Chris has been the president and CEO of ATA now for more than 5 years, going on 6. And before coming to the ATA, he held a variety of leadership positions with Hyundai, Honeywell, as well as serving as the deputy representative with the Coalitional Provisional Authority in Baghdad, Iraq, and 3 years as an assistant secretary of labor. Chris came to Washington, D.C. almost 30 years ago after obtaining a master's degree from the University of Wyoming. He worked for a time on Capitol Hill for 3 members of the United States Senate, including the legendary United States Senator Alan Simpson. Chris, thanks for joining us. Let's get right to the conversation itself. The Supreme Court decision by a vote of 6-3, the High Court decided to put aside the Occupational Health and Safety Administration's rule concerning the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. This was a requirement for masks as well for companies without 100 or more employees. You've said that this would have had a tremendous impact on the trucking industry. And you and the ATA took a very public stand against the mandate early on. And ultimately, it was ATA's legal challenge that was heard by the Supreme Court. Why did the ATA decide at this particular point to weigh in on this issue, and as hard as you did?
Well, Dan, thanks, first of all, for having me on Newsmakers. Pleasure to be here. And to answer your question, I think that's what the members wanted, and it's what the members expected. And you mentioned my first boss, Alan K. Simpson. He used to say, those that travel the high road of humility aren't troubled by heavy traffic. And I got to tell you, I think that's genuinely how our team here at ATA is engineered. We put our members before ourselves. And this is yet again another example of it. My team and I spent a lot of time traveling around the country, outside DC, in the real world, talking to our members. And it's having our finger on the pulse of what they, see, think, need, that really, allows us to define our agenda and set a strategy. It also allows us to react very quickly because we understand that real time. And I think this is a fine example of it, where we were able to turn very quickly to a strategy and execute quickly. And that's exactly what they needed. And we're very pleased with the outcome.
Was this a hard decision to make, to go forward on this in such a public way?
I don't think so. I think that, we pulse our members so frequently that we were really getting a gut check as to what they were seeing. The impact that this would have had it gone forward was immense. The disruption of operations alone, the ability to administer a test program in multiple states, if not 50 for some of our members, was simply impossible to do. And so we developed a narrative that we shared with the White House. We worked very closely to educate those that were making this decision about the impact that it would have, not just on our industry, but all sectors of the economy. And it was very measurable on the supply chain. And I think the balance that you have to have takes into account the economy and industries like ours with public health policy. And we didn't see that with this decision to put forth the mandate, and left us with no alternative but to go forward with a challenge in court. We were very confident from the get-go that we were going to win this, that they exceeded their authority given to them by Congress. And the impact that it would have had was very compelling before the Supreme Court. That's one of the reasons they broke our case out from the rest in our coalition and made the decision that they made. And it just shouldn't have to come to that. I think advocacy should prevail and data and impact. But sometimes the audience you're sharing that with isn't listening. And this is one of those instances where we had to go the distance and follow through with what we did in court, and we're the beneficiary of that outcome. So very pleased with it. Wished it hadn't come to that, but that's exactly what ATA is here to do: represent our members, make certain that our voice is heard, and this is a leading example of just that.
But there was no guarantee that you were going to win, because you had lost in the lower in the circuit court, in the appeals court. It was a mixed ruling going up to when the Supreme Court decided to take it on an emergency basis and actually move their calendar up a week to get this case on their docket.
Well, that's true with respect to the stay. We went from the 6th up to the Supreme Court, and we were very confident that this was going to get heard and decided at the Supreme Court. It was just too big of a national interest to have it heard and decided at that level. It would have been appealed regardless, and it would have gone to the Supreme Court as a result. So we were engineering our strategy around taking it to the Supreme Court. We felt that's where the argument would get heard. And looking at the makeup of the court, we felt that we would get a fair shake. So it was not a surprise to us. Our strategy all along reflected that. So we were in it for the long haul. Thankfully, it didn't take more than 3 months for that to happen. And again, as I said, the outcome was favorable, and it's what we predicted based on the law. And our arguments prevailed, and it's what the Supreme Court ruled on. So we're very pleased with the outcome.
Let's talk a little bit about what could have been the economic impact, because you brought that up just a second ago, and that is that the supply chain, as we reported extensively over the last 2 years now, has had some serious problems. You believe that this could have, had we had mandates, we could have seen a lot of drivers just park their trucks. We could have seen store shelves possibly empty or depleted of merchandise. You're saying we could have had some real serious problems here, you believe?
Yeah, there's no question. I think we work very closely with broader elements within the economy, those that we serve as an industry. We are the glue, and so we touch a lot of segments within the economy that we're feeling the pain from the supply chain, the slow exit from COVID, not just in trucking where we're short 81,000 drivers and have been short of talent, but exacerbated by the slow return to work. But all segments of the economy were feeling it. Had this mandate gone through, Dan, it certainly would have elevated the strain that the supply chain was already feeling. So we were measuring that, we were feeling it, we were sharing that impact, and certainly forecasting what would happen had this mandate gone through. And that's what quickly created such a very strong coalition. It wasn't just trucking, it was everybody that we serve. Anybody that's gone to the grocery store and stood in line, you have fewer checkout clerks. If you go to the airport, there's fewer ground crew, there's fewer flight attendants, fewer pilots. Everyone is experiencing the impact of a shortage of talent. So we're no exception to that. It's something that we understand. We've built into our narrative, and clearly I think would have been compounded. We sample surveyed drivers right out of the gate when this mandate was announced, determined that 37% of our drivers alone, not just technicians, dock workers, and others, but just the drivers, 37% would have up and left. Now, maybe that's a little bit inflated. Let's just say 3.7%. And that's very conservative, would have up and left. That would have had a dramatic impact on our ability to serve the economy in an already strained supply chain. So when you're short 81,000, adding to that rather than subtracting would have made it harder to fight not only COVID and address the public health needs, but deliver the groceries, the fuel. We're moving the vaccine. So the very problem that the president and this administration were proposing in the mandate to fix would have been hurt. And really rounding that understanding is what ATA was trying to do in its prep work. Ultimately, it had to be the Supreme Court that heard it and decides. So I'm pleased. We got the outcome we were looking for. It came with a lot of work, but that, again, is really what we're here to do, is block and tackle on behalf of our members. And that's exactly what you saw here.
You just mentioned a moment ago this coalition that was pulled together. So let's talk about how behind the scenes, over a relatively pretty short period of time, you and others on your team were able to get together a coalition of groups to bring this lawsuit and pull it together. Talk about that. Tell us what happened.
Well, I think it was a quick assembly of like-mindedness. And when you're an industry that, as I said, is the glue, we touch a lot of other, associations around town that are familiar with trucking. They rely on trucking. They understand what we do from point A to B to get their goods. So if you're in manufacturing and you're upstream, you're trying to get those goods to market or to a downstream recipient, it's going to be trucking that's going to move that good. So whether it's manufacturing, heavy equipment, parts, all the way to fuel, to groceries. And in this case, as we shared with the administration, certainly the public health officials, we were really trying to educate the impact this would have on test kits, on masks, and the vaccine itself. From day one, we've been moving all of that. So when you remove more drivers from our workforce, you're going to hurt public health policy. And candidly, these are folks that, in my opinion, have never really worked in the real world. They're well educated. They do an outstanding job of understanding their interest and representing it. But to develop good policy, comprehensive policy, the president needs to do something where it balances public health with the supply chain, with the economic elements. And that's where trucking and all those we serve came together and early on and got very vocal, very loud, and made it very clear that if they went down this path, we would come together and we would file suit. And so it was a real quick reaction force that made that happen. And as a result, we put together a very strong case backed with data, not rhetoric, not emotion, but real good facts that are real time. And that is what the court ruled on. And I believe that was the right decision going forward. So it helps, Dan, when you have such a strong connection with other elements of the economy, those that we serve up and downstream, to bring that together quickly. And I think it was reflected in why the Supreme Court heard our case in the end.
I said at the top that you've been the leader of ATA now for more than 5 years. And you said at the time when the Supreme Court decision was announced that this was the biggest win for the Federation in the time that you've been its leader. Is this bigger than the infrastructure bill, the legislation the president signed into law a couple of months ago? Bigger than that, top some of the other things, the Drive Safe Act?
Well, if it's not up there, it is number one. It's certainly in the top five. I mean, we've had a nice string of victories. Again, it's what our members expect and deserve. When they join ATA, we're here to get things done. It's not about it's about making the news. It's not about reporting the news. And so, when we design an agenda, it's realistic. It's based on outcomes, and certainly reflects the needs of our industry. And we've seen a nice string of them, from infrastructure to tax to lawsuit abuse. Our victories in California on the duplicative meal and rest break. It's not just federal, but it's utilizing the strengths of our 50-state federation of associations. We're in every state congressional district in the country. So we have a lot of membership, but we also have a lot of reach. Our voice is great volume. And when it's in a strategy that is coordinated and unified, you're going to put some wins on the board. And that's what you're seeing here. So, boy, if this isn't number one, it's definitely in the top five. And I just like the cadence, Dan. I like seeing wins come like this, so our membership sees that they're getting a measurable return on their investment into this association. If we do that, if that's our focus and putting our members before ourselves, we're going to continue to see those victories come in.
A couple of weeks ago, as you know, TT's Eugene Malero and I sat down and had a conversation like you and I are now with Secretary Buttigieg. And as a matter of fact, it was about an hour after the Supreme Court delivered their ruling. And he said to me, we're disappointed because we know that vaccine requirements save lives, but we also know there are a lot of ways to get there. And he said, we're hoping that employers will continue to take every step to protect their workforce and protect their customers. You and the Secretary, in the year that he's been in that role, you've had an excellent relationship with the folks over at DOT. Any thoughts on the Secretary's reaction? And also with regards to that, any difficulties do you see working with them because of the fact that on this case, you turned out to be the victor? ATA was the victor.
Yeah, we didn't gloat about it. I think we're happy with it, as you would expect us to say. I would expect the secretary to express disappointment. One thing I admire about Pete Buttigieg is that he knows his place. He knows who he works for. He's part of the team, rolling right under the president. He's going to toe that line, and he understands the president's policy and is going to continue to advocate that. It makes sense that would be a disappointment to them. What I also like about the secretary and his team is that they listen to us. They have us dialed in. We're working collaboratively. Look, Dan, I don't believe that we're going to agree on 100% of the issues we deal with. I never go into that thinking that. It comes with an understanding. And what the secretary did was take the time to listen. I think he understood, as well as the economic team at the White House, what the ramifications would be to the supply chain if this mandate went through. I do believe it was represented in the end. It was the public health team, not the transportation economic team, that prevailed. They're the ones that put the mandate in place. But, we made the argument and he listened. We said, look, our drivers out there have a very low risk of exposure. They're isolated, yet they're moving 73% of the economy, including the vaccine. So the very problem that this mandate's intended to solve is going to be hurt. And I genuinely believe that he heard that case and understood it. Just in the end, policy's policy and you get behind it. So I understand his disappointment. I think as much as he understands that we were very pleased with the outcome. And in the end, that's the way it's decided and we move on. And I believe there's a whole host of issues that out there that the secretary, his team, my team, and I are going to be working on going forward. We're not going to let this get in between us. It is what it is, and we have a whole slew of things that we're going to be focused on going forward, and I'm excited about that.
So as you said, I think the quote was, there's no spiking the football or dancing in the end zone here for the cameras.
No, I think, showing that we're pleased with it, we told them all along that this was going to get bounced in court. We made that very clear. My understanding, my team's understanding in OSHA law is pretty steep. This was an area that we were very familiar with going into it. And we knew that up until this was issued, there had been 5 emergency standards that OSHA had issued in its 50-year history. All 5 were bounced. Only one was able to stand. So out of 6 issued, 5 got bounced. This was the 7th and it got bounced. So they don't have a good history track record at OSHA in issuing these. They write them very reactively. And in this instance, again, exceeded their jurisdiction. We felt that was the case going into this, that would be very similar, and we're prepared for that. So we were pretty confident and coming out of it, what we said, is what happened. So again, victory is great, but we got to get on with the next item. And we have plenty of them in the queue, Dan, and I don't want to sit and let this be a distraction. We're already looking ahead and working with the secretary and his team, to doing the right things. So very excited about that.
And just to point out, to give you this opportunity, you've said that it's not a vaccine issue, it was a mandate issue. That as far as the vaccine, you've encouraged folks to, if that is your decision as a person, talking to your medical professional, the like, go get vaccinated. But it was the mandate issue that was where you were hung up on it.
Yeah, I never went into this discussion, with our challenge in court with the notion that this was a pro or anti-vax issue. This was, if you're going to put this mandate in place, this is the number in our industry that could leave. And that's going to have a measurable impact on the supply chain, which we all care about. So we're having this dialogue. Let's look at this, let's measure it, and let's have an honest calculation as what could happen. And so, when you start pulling the public health elements into the supply chain, we're moving the vaccines. So you have to take that into account. It was very disappointing when the mandate went forward that they wouldn't, listen to that. They wouldn't consider that element, but the Supreme Court did. And in the end, we exercised that option. So, I look at this like any issue that we work on. Sometimes we're going to have to take a defensive posture. And, I like being on the offense. It's a lot more fun, but when we have to dig in, we will. And, this is just one of those instances where our team performed brilliantly. And I think it was built on the backs of our industry. Our members got engaged. We heard them. We took into account the urgency in getting this done. And it was reflected in this win. It was brilliantly executed by the coalition. and very proud that ATA was a part of it. And on behalf of our members, they're the beneficiary.
And you pointed out that this comes at a time when the industry, according to Bob Costello, the chief economist, is the industry is short 81,000, 82,000 drivers. There's also a real shortage of getting warehouse and logistics working jobs filled, those positions filled. Do you think this would have really made things a lot worse, even if 3, 4, 5% of those drivers had decided park their trucks? We could have had in a time of a tight labor market, a pretty serious problem.
Well, I think anytime that you basically tell workers who are employed by someone that has more than 100 employees that if you don't do this, you lose your job. And, in terms of the alternative, which was administering a test program, if you look at our industry, our drivers are out all over the country. They're in multiple states at any one time. They're in places where they can't get testing. How are you going to administer a test a week when you have a logistics, concert like we have? It is an amazing web of intricacies, and if they don't get taken into account, it's going to wreak havoc. And so you're going to see a lot of people that just don't want the jab say, I'm done, I'm out. Some will move from 100 employees or more to 100 or less. I don't like that. I think that picks winners versus losers. If you do care about public health, then why exclude those that work for employers that have less than 100? Is their health not matter any more than those that work for 100 or more? These are policy questions that I don't think were considered. It wasn't a good policy for that respect, and we picked it apart as a result. Look, we're out there moving more with fewer drivers and less equipment, largely driven by the chip shortage. We've got used and new equipment that's just parked idle. We're cannibalizing stuff that's out there, even for depth sensors. So, it's not a good environment right now, and it's not sustainable long term. It's going to continue to compound our ability to serve the economy and serve public health. And so we needed to get vocal about that when it mattered. I'm pleased with the outcome. And now we got to climb out of this COVID rut, and we remove the mandates. Let's focus on the things that we do well and continue that. And I believe we'll climb out much faster as a result. So getting people back to work, not just in trucking, but across all segments of the economy matters. It's going to accelerate that recovery. And this excruciatingly slow return to work is making it hard on everyone, not just trucking. So, that I would encourage people if you're considering a job, there are plenty out there. Trucking is a great workforce, pays very well, great benefits, and we're a family. We take care of one another. So I'd also stress to people that are considering this industry, you're contributing to the strength of our country. So if you have a patriotic bone in your body, this is an industry that really supports that fabric. So these are the things that I think draw good people into our industry that are hard worker. They got great work ethic, and that's the kind of people that we want in. So, it's going to come to a point, Dan, where folks have got to go back to work, and we hope they choose trucking. If not, some element within the economy that we support, and it's going to help us climb out of COVID much quicker.
There's been some chatter that OSHA could consider using their regular rulemaking process to implement some sort of a vaccine mandate or a testing mandate. Any thoughts on that? Have you heard anything on that chatter that could be something that may be coming down the pike that would work around the Supreme Court ruling?
Well, I think often at OSHA, they're more consumed with if we could. They don't stop and decide whether they should. And I can tell you, if they execute that authority, we'll see them in court. Flat out, we'll see them in court. And that's the kind of proposal that's not only going to take at least 2 years before it's effective, but I'll tie it up. I guarantee you, ATA, we'll tie it up for a good 3 more years. We're talking 5 years that we would drag that out. If we're not out of COVID by then, help us all. But I think that we would exercise our legal authority. I believe it would be very, very reflective of what the Supreme Court just ruled on. And again, I think we prevail in court. So if they want to go down that path, fine. I think we have a good precedent now from the Supreme Court to build on, and I like our chances. So I hope they don't go down that road. I wish their resources were used toward good safety and health policy and not chasing something that's already been bounced at the Supreme Court.
that may, as you said, take 3 to 5 years of time to work its way through the minutia of the way government works.
Yeah, I think
Let's talk.
that's a political statement, if any. I don't think that timeline is aligned with our ability to recover from COVID as an economy, as a country. And I think they'd be chasing that thing for years. It'd be a waste of taxpayer money. And ultimately, I think we'd prevail in court. So I think they'd be foolish to chase that rabbit. But again, we're in a great position coming out of this decision at the Supreme Court. They go down that path. We've got plenty of tools in our kit to use.
Let's spend a few moments in the remaining 5 or 6 minutes that we've got left, because you did talk about the infrastructure bill, and it is a significant amount of money that is on the table. I know the calendar says February, and that doesn't mean this is not traditionally the month where people start working on road construction, but the DOTs and the state highway departments are planning that. It was a top priority of yours. So let's talk about that a little bit, about what do you see going forward? Because our roads, our highways, our bridges, as we saw just a couple of weeks ago in Pittsburgh, we've got some serious problems on our hands, don't we?
No doubt, Dan. And glad you raised this issue. As we first 5 years of my being in this role, we've spent an inordinate amount of time and energy on Capitol Hill, particularly telling our story. We've had our members up multiple times from many states that have traveled to DC to really have their voice heard, testifying 25 times over the last 5 years on this issue. I'd say that we definitely made a mark. We helped shape an outcome. And I think in the end, this is a bill that it's going to be not only good for the country, certainly good for our industry. And that's our backyard. That's our shop floor. So having good roads and bridges out there allows us to do our job better and safer. And it's not just our industry. We're sharing it with the motoring public. So there's no reason we can't commingle in a safer way. DOT just came out last week with an initiative to bring down highway fatalities. I can't think of a better way to do that, Dan, than having good infrastructure policy that's funded. And this is a 38% increase over the next 5 years for road and bridge funding. That's unprecedented. We haven't seen that kind of investment in our infrastructure since the Eisenhower years. So this is a significant, historic move by the administration, by Congress. It's something that we've been out there, regardless of who's in charge, saying we need to do this. And what you saw in Pittsburgh is an example of that. Quite candidly, I'm surprised we don't see more of it. I hope we don't. And I hope this bill's quick and it's able to get that money to the states and localities so that bridges like the one we saw in Pittsburgh don't suffer that same fate. We've got 44% of the bridges structurally deficient out there. So the likelihood of this happening more frequently is going to, really raise the concern about getting the money to who needs it, the most. So we're going to be focused over the coming months to make sure that money flows. And I would say probably over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll start seeing those that are prioritized get that money quickly. So I'm very optimistic. I think the next 5 years, DOTs are going to be able to plan not just for repairs, but big projects, new projects, bypasses, the things that take 3, 4, 5 years to build. They'll now have, Dan, the certainty to do that. So this bill is very historic, and I think we're going to see tremendous gains to the productivity and economic, benefits across the country over the next several decades as a result of this bill.
One of the key provisions, at least from my understanding, from your standpoint, was the Drive Safe Act, which had been a standalone piece of legislation, was rolled into the infrastructure bill. It's going to allow young men and women who are well trained and who go through a very specific regimented training program. The administration is also working on ramping up apprenticeships with the trucking industry as well. So talk about that, because I know that you and others have been pushing for this. You've been working with the senator from Indiana, Senator Young, to try and get this through. Talk about this, the Drive Safe Act, and what this is going to do.
Well, I'd give a shout out to Senator Young and everyone else that supported this in the House and Senate. It was bipartisan, both chambers. Senator Young just never gave up. He was a great champion on this issue. It was a freestanding bill for about 5 years, run in parallel alongside the infrastructure bill. And it was great to see it included ultimately in the infrastructure bill that was passed and signed into law. And I think because it was bipartisan, and more importantly, because it made sense. You've got 49 states, Dan, plus the District of Columbia, already with laws on the books that allow an 18-year-old to drive a Class 8. But there's no training and there's no technology requirements attached to any of that. What the Drive Safe Act did was include 400 hours of training, of which 240 hours you have to have an experienced driver in the cab with the new talented, candidate for that CDL, teaching them how to responsibly and safely operate this equipment. And so training is paramount. Training is key. That's really the foundation of this bill. But we took it a step further. We included technology like automated emergency braking, adaptive cruise control, speed governors, cameras. These are things that don't exist in any of the 49 states or the district. So in my view, and the view of the senators and the congresspeople that supported this, was that this is a step toward safety, not away. So for anybody that opposed this, I would just ask the simple question: where were you when 49 states in the district passed laws that allowed an 18-year-old to drive a Class 8 with no training and no technology? Dan, you'd just hear crickets. You wouldn't hear a word from these people. And we put something forth that's built on training and technology, and they come unhinged, like this is the worst thing. We picked that apart. We won. We got it in the bill. It's signed into law. It's because it's good policy. And I'm really excited to work with the DOT in creating this program, really building on its momentum. I think it's going to draw a lot of young new talent into our industry. It's going to really, really supplement those that are leaving in their elder years. We've got to replace them. We've got to grow. We've got to grow the economy. And to do that, we've got to add talent to this industry. And so I'm very excited about this program that we're putting forth with DOT, and we'll get it right.
Have we been missing in closing? Have we been missing for a 5-year period those 18, 19, 20-year-old, maybe up to age 25? Because I've heard figures discussed that most people who enter the trucking industry the first time, they're in their 30s, sometimes their 40s, after they've been in another career and they've changed careers and then come to trucking. And we don't get them when they're 17, 18, 19, like you would in a traditional industry.
Absolutely. And by the way, we put such an emphasis in this country on going to college. You've got to go to college to be successful. I don't understand the logic behind that. There is nothing to say that going to college is going to guarantee you to be a success in life. There are so many paths out there, and this is one where you join an industry, and in many instances, in a couple years' time, you're going to be making more than most people that leave with a college degree, and you're going to be doing it without all the debt that generally comes with a 4-year degree. So I really want to see our industry have the same shot at attracting talent at that age that other trades do. If you want to be an electrician, a plumber, any kind of contracting trade through apprenticeships that teach you those skills, I don't see why we can't do the same for those interested in being a driver, even a technician. I'm not dismissive of any element within the industry. Trucking needs to be in the same position to recruit that talent than anyone else. And, up until this law passing, Dan, it put us at a disadvantage. So I believe it's a leveling of the playing field. I also believe that if you can send an 18, 19, 20-year-old overseas to defend our freedom, train them to do the unthinkable, I'm pretty certain that we can teach them how to cross state lines in a Class 8 vehicle. So I'm very confident that this is a responsible and safe way to do it. And I firmly believe that it's a step towards safety, something that the other 49 states don't have. So very excited about the prospects and the future this will have on our industry.
Chris, on that note, we're out of time, and I want to thank you for being so generous with your time and to sit here and answer our questions and chat with us.
You bet, Dan. Thanks for having me on.
Chris Spear, the president and CEO of the American Trucking Association, is joining us for this edition of Newscast. This webcast will be available for viewing on demand. Very simple. Go to ttnews.com for more information, how you can watch our interview with Chris Spear. I'm Dan Ronan with Transport Topics at ttnews.com. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for joining us today. For more information on future episodes, visit ttnews.com. This has been Transport Topics Newsmakers.